Hey everybody, welcome back to Backtrekking, the podcast where we look back at the real-world inspirations behind classic episodes of Star Trek. I'm one of your hosts, Caliban, and I'm appearing to you through the use of a medium. And let me tell you, it's not cheap. I'm joined on this episode by my co-host.
Hey, it's me, Gooey Fame, and I'm starting to have some hope in humanity again.
Would you swear on that? Would you testify to that?
I would take care of the metaphorical baby myself.
Where did we got the swearing on the Bible, right? We got that from somewhere. What did people swear on before there was a Bible or in other cultures? That's what I want to know.
Oh,
because otherwise you're coming in and who knows? People are just lying about whatever.
About your mother's grave?
There you go.
Yeah.
We'll take him out to the grave, put his hand on it. Yeah. We have returned to explore the inspirations behind your favorite episodes of Star Trek, and we've got a big one this week, a classic episode of The Next Generation, and a film considered to be one of the greatest films ever made. And maybe we'll debate that a little later.
Okay.
How are you doing?
All things considered, doing okay.
Yeah.
Just that constant state of whatever's going on now.
It's always something.
Yeah.
And it feels, I mean, look, it's like a cognitive thing, right? There's no way that, I mean, politically, yeah, we're in the shitter, but there's no way that like every single thing, like, 2020 memes, man. There's no way that everything can be horrible all the time, right? Except for the fact that I'm so busy, like this week alone, I'm the proverbial, one-legged man in the ass-kicking contest, and I haven't a lot of time to cook, so I use delivery services, and I'll put them on blast. I don't care. DoorDash is terrible, and they've always been terrible, and just trying to coexist with them has been tough. But they do this thing where they deliver to the building next to mine for some reason. They keep delivering to the next building over. I don't live in this building. And so people just drop food outside the building because of coronavirus. And so my food just sits there and I'm like, where's my food? And so today I ordered lunch and the guy, I often get a text, from the driver, like your buzz box isn't working because they're using it's not my buzz box. And I go downstairs and I go, hey, I'm over here. I'm over here. Guy comes over and this is a usual thing. I just go, there's a huge sign on my building that says, XXX. That's my, my number, Elm Street or whatever. I don't want to dox myself. And I'm like, yes, see, it's XXX. And he's like, that thing says XXY. And he's like screaming at me. I'm about to get into a fight with my DoorDash driver. And he flips me the bird and runs off. And yeah, I'm like, that's perfect. That's all I need. It's not just a sandwich. I need like a sandwich and, somebody screaming at me. And, I just have to eat that while I work on all this stuff.
Hey, tensions are high out there right now.
They are.
I've been playing Death Stranding, and I know it's hard out there for.
I know this is going to connect.
All the delivery people.
Okay, there we go. Right there.
I actually used to do delivery myself, and it was pretty rough doing food delivery.
It so is, and the second part of the story, insofar as it's a story, is, I go on to DoorDash's customer service thing and I'm like, we're going to get this solved today. Like, I'm going to talk to them. I'm going to find out like why the drivers, cause I sympathize with the drivers. I don't want them to yell at me, but like, I sympathize if they're getting the wrong number, fine, let's fix this. And I go to the thing and it's just, they don't have an email address. You can call or chat with them, but it's all, it's offshore and that's fine. I don't think people get mad about like sending call center jobs overseas anymore, which is fine. But I think that when you do that, you also kind of defer the responsibility because they're never really well trained. There's nothing that they can ever really do for you. They're just kind of like emotional support counselors. Like, yes, I hear that you're angry. It is valid to feel angry. And so I couldn't get a straight answer out of this guy about how the delivery thing works and what my address is. I looked on the order and it says my address, but I was thinking like sometimes they like detect physically where you are. Like if you order from like a friend's house and it's not your usual, your house, they go, are you sure you want it to go to the friend's house? And it's like, yeah. And I sit, this is what I've been doing instead of all the work that I should be doing. My office where I usually order food from is right next to this other building. So it's like, is the satellite thinking that I'm at that building? And all of this stuff I was ready to bring to the guys and we could get to the bottom of this. So no getting in fistfights with drivers. couldn't help me at all. Completely unhelpful. Just not. And then like when I told him that the guy yelled at me, suddenly the call became all about the fact that he yelled at me. And I'm like, I'm not trying to report him for yelling at me. I'm trying to fix this problem.
Yeah.
And it's just totally intractable. So yeah, we need Sam Bridges to get out here.
Sam Porter Bridges. Come on. Yeah. I love how stupid and like not intuitive these like big systems are that are supposed to, like I ordered from a local place that is just, they just have their own system, and it's like, it's great. You just put in your address and they bring you the food. Like, why is something so simple?
Yeah, that's
so
what this should be too. Yeah. But DoorDash, doesn't care, doesn't want to help, and of course steals their employees' tips.
I had a good one, actually, with this local place, because I tipped the guy pretty good, because I don't order out a lot. So I was like, I'll give him a pretty good tip, because
Sure.
he's out there. There's the time fall. He's got his BB. Got to take care of him. And he was like, wow, thanks for the tip. And he's like, look, I got a bunch of extra pops out in my car if you want one. And I was like, sure, man. And he brought me back like a 2-liter root beer.
That's cool.
I was like, sweet.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll ever order DoorDash again, but if I do, and that happens again, I'm just going to have a $20 bill. And when the person comes over, I'm just going to go, this is yours if you show me your app. Do you know what I mean? Like I want to look at what my address says. Yeah. And you can hold your phone. I'm going to take a picture of it though. So I have something I can send to DoorDash, and then, Sawbuck is yours.
Evidence, collecting evidence.
Yeah. Well, none of that was Star Trek news, but we usually talk about Star Trek news at the top of the show. Real quick, I wanted to ask you if you got to see Lower Decks when it premiered.
I did.
Last week.
Yeah, I did watch it.
What'd you think?
Yeah, and I listened to your coverage of it. I thought it was pretty good.
Oh, my Discoverage coverage.
Your Discoverage coverage, yeah.
Every Thursday.
I don't know. I thought it was okay. I went in with like kind of tempered expectations, and I was just kind of like, yeah, it's all right. I didn't think it was very funny myself, but the story was a decent enough premise for a Star Trek show. And yeah, I don't know. I thought it was okay.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much all of that. And, like you said before, very sagely, tensions are high. And I don't want to be one of these people who's immediately declaring the death of the Star Trek franchise. But I did wish that it had been funnier, since that's what's on sale here. I think I mentioned on the Discoverage episode that, it shares a lot of DNA with Rick and Morty, and the pilot of Rick and Morty is so good. Like sometimes I just sit down and watch the pilot of Rick and Morty, just because of how well it introduces you to that world, and it's surprising and hilarious. And I just felt like if Second Contact, the first episode of Lower Decks, could have been that, it just would have, it would have signified. Yeah, it would have signified a better future for the show. I mean, it can absolutely get better from there. But if you think about like let's do the first one, the best one first. Whatever the script is, the jokes, we'll put it all, front loaded. And I don't know. I hope they didn't do that, because anyway. I hope it gets better. It wasn't terrible. It certainly wasn't terrible.
Connect with, I think it was like the Polygon review of it that said like it was kind of like a sanitized version of all the things that's like based on like Rick and Morty and even Star Trek.
Huh.
And it's kind of
I can see that.
unoffensive. And that's kind of how I felt about it, where it's like, oh, it didn't really bother me. But then when it reminded me of Picard a little bit, in different ways, where I watched it and I thought, oh, this is okay. And then when I talked to you later about it, and I thought about all these things that on first watch. No, it's just like when you really think about how it's not pushing the needle or anything, it's like that actually is kind of offensive. Like the fact that it's so unoffensive, because Star Trek should kind of like rile you up in some way,
I don't know if today's episode riles anybody up at all, but I think that's a good point.
That's fair. Well, I just rewatched Encounter at Farpoint. And it's like a very uneven, weird episode, but
it's not great.
it did like inspire a lot of different feelings in me, at least, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Oh, look at the space jellyfish.
Oh, that Groppler Zorn.
Groppler, man.
I'm no comedy expert, but I talked to one. I actually talked to a comedy writer recently for Enterprising Individuals, specifically about the fact that Trek is not very funny. Like, it doesn't put itself out. It's not trying to be Young Sheldon or something, but I feel like there are light moments and there are like quote unquote jokes, but they always are like, okay, all right, yeah. It's like that friend who you really like him. He's really fun to hang out with, but he's just not. He's not as funny as he thinks he is. Yeah, and I do say he. And we were talking about Lower Decks and how and it wasn't all that funny. And I found an article where Mike McMahon, the guy who is the creator and head writer, was being interviewed on CNET, and he said, our first rule when writing Star Trek jokes is don't punch down on Star Trek. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Star Trek is a gigantic franchise that's been around forever. There is no way to punch down on Star Trek. And what he means is this cow is too sacred. We can't take any chunks out of it. And that's not a way.
No,
that's not.
bad.
I didn't think that was what was on sale. I thought we were getting like, a parody show.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought it was going to be. Like, we're going to kind of tear some of the conventions down or something,
Yeah.
In a show like this, you can, and there's low low consequences, I think,
Yeah, it's a not a good signpost for future episodes, if that's their philosophy. I wanted, like Belushi doing, Shatner on SNL, like make fun of it,
I mean, I feel like Star Trek does that sometimes,
Makes fun of itself?
Yeah. I mean, not like overtly, but sometimes it's like a little goofy for the sake of it, and it's like, okay. I don't know, like I always like the humor in Star Trek that's like it's just more like cuz the characters are just inherently kind of funny. Like when Worf's gets in, Worf likes prune juice or whatever. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. But this new stuff and even some of the comedy and Discovery is more of your, I don't know, whatever the modern sensibility is, where it's just like your sarcastic heroes.
Yeah.
That can be funny sometimes, but I don't know.
Sweat isn't really funny, and they're pushing so hard to try to make this funny. But
it's all right.
I don't know. Something that we forgot to talk about in this, and I'm just going through this entire episode now, which you'll be able to catch in the future on Enterprising Individuals, but we talked about the fact that Trek often has comedic actors on Trek, and they're never funny. Like,
yeah.
The one person I can think of is Scott Thompson from Kids in the Hall was on an episode of Voyager, and he was there to be a funny guy. But like Jason Alexander wasn't funny. Michael McKean wasn't funny. Like they have funny people on and they're never funny.
Dick was on
Andy Dick was, it was
not
really
funny.
He was a little funny. He was awkward. And that's why I think having Tig Notaro on Discovery was such a revelation, because like she's a comedian. She's funny. She's dry. She's on the show to be funny and dry, and it's perfect.
She had some good moments. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's probably the best example, because I didn't really connect with a lot of the humor, but I do like her sense of humor in that.
Yeah, so who knows? It's babies in her awkward teen years, and someday we're going to get some really funny Trek stuff, but it doesn't. I think we have to go through this to get to that.
You know who's funny? Miles O'Brien is funny.
He really is, and he tells jokes sometimes, but the idea of everybody's like, this is Riker is like the hot shot. He's going to be a space captain. Troy is a telepathic, alien exotic lady. Everybody on Trek has like a hook, but not him. His whole thing is he's just a guy.
Yeah,
he's a guy in space, and there's so much stuff that you can do with that. And yeah, the comedy writer brought up the Chief O'Brien at Work comic, which is that's what Lower Deck should be. Maybe a little more flash, but just like the existential weirdness of him. His job is just pushing buttons on this console all day. Yeah,
I want According to Miles. Or it's just the Miles O'Brien sitcom.
Yeah, his family sitcom, and it's all filmed from one angle in the in the quarters, through three walls, and yeah.
They could still do that.
They should. They have to do that. Oh, okay. Well, anyway, enough of that fun. Now it's serious times.
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk about today's subject. Akira Kurosawa is a film director. He directed 30 films in his career, many of which are considered cinematic masterpieces. 15 of them starred his frequent collaborator, actor Toshiro Mifune. And Kurosawa made his directing debut in 1943 with the film Sanshiro Sugata. And this is as, of course, World War II is raging. He would continue to write and direct films after the end of World War II, and he would become an important cultural voice and social critic in post-war Japan. Perhaps his most famous film and social critique is the 1950 psychological thriller Rashomon.
私は世にも恐ろしい地獄を見た。盗賊、美女、死霊、そしてソマウリ。4つの口が物語る4つの地獄の声を聞かされた。まさにこれは心のジャングルの藪の中の物語。ギラギラと光る重欲の目が。集落外にその名を知られたこの多条丸が帰って出てつけた。頼むから俺の妻になると言ってくれ。俺の妻になると言ってくれ。一筋の光もない闇の中で苦しみもだえている。この無限の闇に私を突き落とした者に呪いある。
We're doing a Rashomon.
Yeah. Oh, we should have made that the format for this episode.
We just do our things separately, and I talk about it, then you talk about it, then we get a dog to talk about it.
Yeah,
dog. This is, I mean, everybody knows this film, right? Like it's whenever I watch TV, mostly genre TV, and something happens, and then they have to talk to a bunch of characters about it, and everybody's retelling is a little different. It's like, oh, they're doing a Rashomon. It's like a convention.
I've actually always just known the movie through the reference. Like, I've never actually seen it before, so. But I was extremely aware of this movie. So, yeah, that's how. I think we've done a couple movies like that, where it's like, it's become such a cultural touchstone that it's like, you almost can't not know at least the premise of it.
Yeah, it's actually like a phenomenon, or like a term in eyewitness study, because it's called the Rashomon effect, and it's the fact that like eyewitnesses are horribly unreliable. Like you just never get the facts from an actual eyewitness. You know, they will say they'll get the color of a shirt wrong, you know, or they'll say that a guy had a gun but he had a knife or something, and people think that their memories are good and that they're getting, you know, the details correct, but just through different psychological processes, they're just getting things totally wrong. And I just think that, like, I didn't go to film school, although I've spent the rest of my life trying to make up for it, apparently. And I just think somebody must know when the first application of this storytelling device was, right? I mean, Rashomon can't be the first Rashomon. There's got to be some earlier film where people were like, well, I think it was like this. I think it was like this.
Oh, yeah, I wonder. I mean, this just feels like it's the biggest
but this is certainly the most famous, though. And it's crazy to think. I love this movie. I have seen it a couple times. And it's crazy to think that it was made in 1950.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I was watching this movie and I literally said out loud, it's weird to think about that, you know, like making a movie in 1950. I don't know why. Yeah. But I think it was just like when they're like marching around in the mountains, in the forest, and I'm like, and it's literally just footage of a guy, woodcutter, stomping around. I was like, holy cow, this is crazy.
And it's got to be Dolly stuff, right? I mean, the way that the cinematographer Kazuo Miyagawa is very highly acclaimed, worked with Kurosawa 3 times. And it's like 1950. It's, 5 years after the bomb drops. Japan is technologically advanced, but they don't have they got some cinema, but not a ton, right? You've got a guy who, Kurosawa started as a painter. Then he's like, I want to be in films in like the late 30s. And so this guy's only been in the industry for like a decade as an assistant director. And he produces this Rashomon. Like, it's so sophisticated. When you think about what a 1950 movie, an average 1950 movie, not like something great like Casablanca, would be in America, it's just a bunch of idiots sitting around, smoking cigarettes. And it's all from it's filmed like a play from One Direction. And this is just it's just so cinematic. And he's pioneering techniques, and he's like creating new techniques. And it's incredible. And just the fact that it's not a linear narrative, the way it jumps around, and it's unbelievable. This is very early for him, one of his first films, and he just nails it.
Yeah, it feels, compared to Casablanca, which I think I remember saying it felt very modern just from how jumpy it was. This felt very modern just in terms of being more interesting or something, like a lot of movies in the 90s or whatever, when they're like, let's get weird with them. This felt like this felt like that, where it's like jumping all over, and it's got these conflicting narratives. Like, it just feels less like pop cinema. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this is like 1950s black and white Japanese Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, pretty much. And you mentioned how impressive a lot of it is, and then I think the scenes where it's not they're not doing something totally crazy, it's impressive in its simplicity. I think of when they're all giving their testimony and they're just kind of sitting in front of a wall, and you never see the judge, and you just got the two guys sitting in the background. It's very simple like that. I always found that's very beautiful and really evocative to me too.
Yeah. I love the way that they get to story in a story, and they do it almost immediately. So the whole thing is obvious. I mean, for people who haven't seen it, and if you haven't seen it, watch it. I don't know why you're listening to this, but there is actually the whole thing's a frame story, because we start off at the Rashomon gate with a bunch of guys who are just chilling, a woodcutter, a priest, and then I don't know. He's not a bandit, but he's just a ne'er-do-well.
He's just a bad boy, yeah.
Yeah, and they start talking about this horrible thing that happened, and what happened was, a guy was murdered in a forest grove, and then we get the testimonies of the people who were involved. This bandit called Tajamaru, played by Toshiro Mifune, and then the woman, and then even in the beginning where the woodcutter is telling the story of their different testimonies, and he's telling the testimony of Tajumaru, but in Tajumaru's testimony, we see him, and he's like, oh, did I do this? No, that's not what happened. I did this. And so he's already, in his story, he's telling different stories that are within the story of the woodcutter, which is within this story in the movie that we're watching. And it's like, stop it.
Yeah, that's something I didn't expect, because I knew the hook and what the deal was. And then when it's here's another framing device, it was I was very interested. I thought that was impressive on itself too.
It's frames within frames within frames.
I guess you mentioned In a Grove, maybe that's one of the earlier instances of this type of story, is the story it's based on.
That's right. Yeah. The plot is based on a story called In a Grove, by an author named Ryunosuke Atagawa. And it's funny because he had a collection of they were published in a magazine, stories. So the plot is taken from In a Grove, but the title is taken from a short story called Rashomon.
Oh, okay.
And so I think the frame story most resembles the Rashomon short story, and then the In a Grove story is within. Yeah, there's the trial.
Crazy.
And in the Rashomon short story, it's sort of it's like they're at the Rashomon gate. It's ruined, and this man is thinking about whether he's going to become a thief or not because things are so bad. And then he goes like upstairs to the next level of the gate, and he sees a woman stealing hair from dead bodies. And he's like, "Ugh, forget this. I'm going to be righteous." But she tells him, "Well, I'm stealing these to make wigs, so I can sell them and survive." And these people are horrible people. Like, she goes through all the horrible things that the dead people did. And so she's just kind of justifying what she's doing. And then she says, like, if I don't do this, I'll starve. That's sort of the way it is. And the man says, like, "Well, then I guess you won't blame me for taking your stuff." And so he like takes all her kimono and all of her stuff, and that's how the story ends. So yeah, it's a real uplifting tale.
It's kind of the opposite here in the movie.
Yeah. The movie does resolves with some hope.
Yeah,
but not much.
That's what I liked about the conflicting narratives was because in a lot of these you see like you have the conflicting narratives and it's usually just for it makes for good drama and like a good mystery, but in here like there really was an added reason for them. Like I felt like all the characters were telling these stories, and I felt like the biggest thing preventing them from like sort of revealing the truth is that like the truth in everyone's story is like it's kind of a humiliating way to portray yourself, and so right. I felt like that was awesome. That was like it actually played into like saying something about human nature and like not wanting to like admitting, because in everyone's story like they were kind of responsible for the death, and to them like admitting that was worse than like the humiliation they would suffer,
Yes. Yeah.
Which you don't see like even in the Star Trek episode we watched. Like it really was more of just like a cool framing device than anything,
Yeah. It's a chance to use the kind of, devices literally sometimes that you have in Star Trek to tell a story, and just going, "Oh, well, we could do like a Rashomon type thing." Yeah. Okay. Now we don't have to talk about the Star Trek episode. we just finished it. That was the whole thing. I think it's interesting that, you made a great point about why people lie. And I think that this whole thing is, I don't know. I've seen most of Kurosawa's movies, and I've seen them as a young man who is interested in film. I'd like to go back as an older man who's interested in character and why artists make things, because this is a pretty damning social commentary of society, and I wonder if, I'm not sure how pointed it is at that time modern Japanese culture. It's set at the Rashomon, this gate in Kyoto, which was burned and ruined, and this is pretty far back. Like this is in I think the Heian period of Japan, which would be around probably the 12th century, and the gate is trashed. There's only one part of it left that these guys are taking shelter from the rain under, and it's it's supposed to represent the degradation of morality in society, and like a guy will take a baby's blanket and leave the baby and think nothing of it. And yeah, I don't know a ton about the post-war Japan, but I wonder who he is kind of pointing this at. Making these accusations of, like you said, like an overriding pride. And if it has anything to do, people love to speculate on what the Japanese thought about World War II, but if it has anything to do with like castigating the pride of the Japanese imperial government in making war in the first place.
Yeah, I do. Sometimes when I watch, especially foreign movies and especially movies from a different era where it's like, just like a time or a culture that I'm a little less familiar with, I do have sort of a disconnect of like, this is probably commenting on something I don't understand. But this was a great work, so I felt like there were some universal themes that I kind of drew from it, like especially the humiliation and lying and stuff like that.
Yeah, like
I definitely felt connected sometimes to like the time. It made me think of times where it's like, oh, I would rather like be viewed in a certain way just so I don't like, just so something else, just so people wouldn't think something about me or something like that. It really connected to some moral part of me or something,
Yeah. Yeah. You'd rather, instead of being thought of as somebody who fell off their horse, you'd rather be like, I had to take a shit in the field.
Yeah, totally.
That's not what happened. Yeah. I was just popping a squat.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. This gate, does not exist anymore. It hasn't existed for almost 1,000 years. But if you can see like a model of it, online or like on Wikipedia, and it's very impressive looking. And now, just because of the expansion and urbanization of Japan, there's nothing left of it. All that's left is there's a stone pillar to mark where it used to stand. And it's right next to like a playground.
Oh,
it's just like on a city street. It's like, this is where it was. Which is just kind of telling, I think, as well. And that name, calling it Rashomon, actually comes from so again, the history of Rashomon is like a shell and a shell and a shell, but it comes from a Japanese no theater play from the 15th century. That is not, it doesn't have anything to do with any of the stories in any of the short stories in the movie or anything like that, but it's sort of like a play on words, which is it's too complicated to go into, but it's, so that gate
right.
became known like historically as Rashomon.
Okay.
Yeah, there's just that's the thing I love about foreign cultures and not America necessarily, is that there's just so much tradition, that just goes down over the years and years. And like when we think about America, the tradition that we focus the most on is, the foundation of our democracy. And that's pretty much like all the history that we have.
It's not very far back.
The White House, the Lincoln Memorial, which that was built recently, but like the Washington Monument and that sort of thing. But like in other countries, it's like, this family has lived in this place, this, area for 2,000 years, or here's a palace that was built in the 13th century. And it's just like, wow.
Yeah. Like you made me think of when you mentioned that pillar, and like the only way, like, I feel like we interact with culture older than that is like just us encroaching on, native cultures or whatever. Like you see that picture that was going around of like the do not trespass, lettering like painted over like a painting from like 500 AD. Did you see that recently? And it was like, that's like the perfect metaphor for like American culture is just slowly encroaching on things that were here before us.
Yeah, or like, carving the faces of a couple of slaveholders into a mountain that was, taken from Native American
Yeah, totally.
people.
Yeah. But it's like, so that stuff in our minds, like, doesn't exist before us. Like we made it out of, this stone that was nothing when it really is not, so.
Oh, yeah. And that's like what, European and Asian tourists, when they come here, that's what they want to see. Like there's still a lot of somewhat virgin territory. We have so much land in America. And so it's like the physical sites are like, cause like I haven't been to the Grand Canyon, but I've seen it. I've seen it in IMAX. Like, I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool. But people are just like, wow, this is just like, it's amazing. Sure. In Japan, we have like mountains, but it's just trains and trains and trains. But like, look at all this. It's incredible.
Yeah, I guess too that it's so much larger compared to Japan, so like they're encroaching on their own history and stuff like that because there's like a lot quicker. So
they're always making decisions about what they have to sort of raise or plow under or keep. I love that, like whenever they want to put a sewer in or just like a new road in England, they start digging down and they're like, oh, we found King Richard II or something like that. He's just laying in there. He's just in there.
High historical density.
We forgot where he was. Yeah, there he is.
Yeah. It's like we find stuff like that, and it's just like, oh, this is a bunch of garbage.
Yeah, just tear that up and, toss it out. This is a movie which is from a genre called Jidaigeki, which literally means period drama. And it's stuff that is set. They never say when this is set. I figured it was set, very early because of the gate. But generally, Jidaigeki is set in the Edo period, which is basically like Japan's expansion, the rise of their middle class. It's like the sort of Pax Japana period of their history. And a lot of the samurai films you see, ones by, for instance, Kurosawa, like Yojimbo, are films, about, heroes, wandering, masterless samurai. Like, the Eastwood film, A Fistful of Dollars, the spaghetti western is based on, Yojimbo, the Kurosawa film about a guy. So it's like a lot of these stories are like supposed to be kind of adventure stories, kind of action movies, just setting, it's like knights, stories about knights and ladies and things like that, horses.
Right.
That's sort of their period. But I love the fact that he so early in the establishment of this genre was like, no, I'm going to tell a story that's like a psychological story.
Yeah, this absolutely wasn't an action movie. And I even thought like there were fight scenes in this, but I don't know how it was supposed to come across, but I felt like
it's pathetic.
Yeah, pathetic. Okay, yeah. Cool. I didn't know if that was like
yeah.
Cuz I was like, again, in their stories, like they come off so everyone seems so shitty, and then even their fights aren't like glorious or anything,
Yeah, Tajomaru is supposed to be like this kick-ass bandit, and his story is like, I killed the guy, or I banged his wife, and she's like, oh, yeah, that was pretty great. Now you got to kill this guy. And, yeah, I killed him. That just happens. And then when we finally get the woodcutter's story, because spoiler alert, I guess he saw the whole thing. The story that he tells, they're just rolling around on the ground, and they're both terrified of having to fight. And that's so different than what you get from most Jidai stories, badass samurai who are ready to die, living by a code. And the samurai in this film is a coward, and the bandit's a coward, and everybody's a coward. And you just feel bad for the wife because she's like, has to put up with these idiots.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was no like thrilling fights, at least not in that way. It was more like tense. So I was just like very nervous and upset.
Yojimbo, though, which also stars Toshiro Mifune, is incredible, and there are some really badass fights. If you like samurai films or samurai action, that's an amazing film, which itself. Hey, are you ready? Itself is based on a pulp novel by American author Dashiell Hammett called Red Harvest, about a mobster who like goes to a town where there are two opposing factions, and he kind of plays them off of each other. So, and like Kurosawa just stole that. Like, he read that book and was like, this is great. I'm going to make this into a samurai thing, and I'm not going to pay for it or tell anybody. And it wasn't until later that people were like, wait a minute, this is a book. Like, this is a hard-boiled pulp novel. And he's like, yep, sorry.
Nice. What a master here.
Yeah, everybody. I mean, this is like the peak of Mount Fuji for backtracking, because it's just a story about people, creators borrowing from other creators, and
right.
and then the people in the stories are all telling stories, and it's
and also
it's a fun house.
I guess it would be worth the connection too, because we did that episode on Star Wars that he inspired George Lucas. So
Toshiro Mifune was in The Hidden Fortress, which was a huge inspiration for Star Wars. And also, I mean, we think it's kind of cheesy today, but like the wipe scene transition is something that Kurosawa helped. I mean, he gave it he used it a lot, and of course Lucas picked it up.
And then of course this movie was made in Kurosawa mode, much like the new video game Ghost of Tsushima.
That's what it is. That's why I wanted to talk about this. I've been playing Ghost of Tsushima all day. Yeah,
you've been playing in Kurosawa mode.
So the thing that really frustrates me, and I've seen this and I've heard this from other players, and specifically Japanese language speaking players, is that they went to the trouble of having a Japanese language soundtrack, which is great, but all the characters speak. It's a Western game. It's made by a Western company, and all the characters and their mouths use English language. So you can switch it to Japanese, but there's this weird inversion where you're watching a dubbed movie. Yeah, where they're speaking. It's dubbed into Japanese.
It should be the other way around.
Yes, and a lot of people are asking. I don't know. They probably never will, but asking Sucker Punch to do a patch where it changes the character's mouth movements, so they're speaking Japanese when you've got Japanese on.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways that people have talked about how kind of inauthentic it is, I guess. Kurosawa mode just means it's black and white.
It's black and white,
like film grain or whatever. But I wanted to slip that in there just because
Kurosawa's films look way better than Kurosawa mode in Ghost of Tsushima.
Right, yeah.
He would never let it look that bad.
The most recent thing I saw about it was that like they letterbox it, and they there's like a film grain effect, but like someone pointed out like the film grain goes over the letterboxing. So yeah,
like into the mat. Okay.
Yeah, very weird.
It's still a fun game though, and
sure.
I love the setting because it's also not in the Edo period. It's in the here I am. I never can remember the name of this period. It always goes right in one ear and not the other. But it's set in like the 13th or 14th century.
Okay,
which was a time right before the like the warring states period of Japanese culture. So it's leaving the Heian period, which was a very courtly, peaceful time, and then the rise of like shoguns and like regional like rulers has caused problems. But forget all that shit, because here come the Mongols, and so it's about like the first of two Mongol invasions of Japan, where they just rolled in and like devastated a lot of the western cities in Japan until the famous kamikaze wind destroyed a lot of their ships and fleet, and they had to back off.
Okay. So I just wanted to talk about it so I could have you convince me whether I should actually play this game or not.
Oh, okay.
Sounds good.
It's worth getting. I think that there's a lot of features that you wish it had. Like I think like Ghost of Tsushima 2 is going to be an awesome game, but this is a totally pleasurable, very cinematic game, and yeah, it's definitely a $40 buy, if not a $60 buy.
Okay, I'll wait, because you know how those PlayStation games come down.
Oh, it'll come down, yeah, for sure.
All right, sweet. Well, podcast mission accomplished.
Okay, well, goodbye. There's also a great YouTube video called The Entire History of Japan. There's this guy who like...
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, he did a History of the World one as well, but if you hear about all these Japanese periods and you like Rashomon and that sort of thing, you should check it out for sure.
It's funny, yeah.
I love the fact that this, you get... Once you're watching the movie, which is only 88 minutes, which is funny, it feels a lot longer, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It feels...
Oh, definitely.
You get very invested in the stories. But once you know that, okay, here's what's happening, like everybody's testifying, I get it. And they go, okay, thanks, that's the wife's story. Now let's hear from a ghost.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
It really is like, because, yeah, you're like, okay, we're going to hear from everyone. And then that's just, like, totally derails it in not a bad way. Just like, I was so shocked.
Have the ghost swear on a Bible or whatever they had. And then, there's this scene where this medium, who is played by a woman named Noriko Honma, is throwing herself around, and they do a dubbing thing where she's like speaking in the man's voice. Yeah. And so not only has he done like tricky, difficult filmmaking on location, and he's done like a, classic sort of courtly samurai thing. Now he's doing like experimental, like subjective, cinema. And it's just like, this guy, this is his resume. He's just going, check it out, world. Look what I can do.
Right. Because it feels very realistic up to that point too.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it still could be like, you could believe that they would call in a medium, but it's the whole like effect they do with the voice and everything, where it's like this has gone into a new category or something.
Yeah. What I want to know is like I guess Tajimaro is just going to jail, or he's going to, get his head cut off or something. But I want to know what like the judgment is, because the judge hears his story. He hears the wife's story, the wife played by Machiko Kiyo, and then he hears the ghost's story, and it's like, is the ghost story more true because a Shinto medium summoned him, or do you go, I think that ghost is lying? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
they don't really give
how do you
much.
know how do you know if they believe ghosts or not?
Right. They actually don't you don't ever see the judge, and you don't really get a sense of the court process. It's just kind of the stories, which is cool, I think.
I think it's kind of a mockery of the system as well. Like,
oh, I see.
Because we don't see the court or the judge, but the fact that they would like, yeah, bring a ghost in here. Let's ask a ghost. Like, can there be any justice in a system that interviews ghosts, about their own deaths?
Yeah, it's less respectful of the system than like what happens in the Star Trek episode, for example, but it's way cooler. So
yeah, right.
I think we should allow it.
Yeah, I'll allow it.
Yeah, anytime there's a murder, if we could just talk to the ghosts, I think we go right to the source. Who killed you?
Right. Yeah, I've seen that. And yeah, it's got like kind of fantasy or sci-fi elements as well. Because you see that in like, they killed him, so we're gonna raise the spirit, or like we're gonna use this technological device to like see his last thoughts or what he saw or something like that. Yeah.
So I got to be honest, if I was a ghost, right, and someone was interviewing me or having me testify about who killed me, it'd be kind of tempting to be like, this guy killed me, but this other guy, he's really done me wrong in life, so maybe throw this guy under the bus instead.
Yeah, it's weird because
a ghost could lie.
Yeah, right. Because that's what he does, kind of. Because he's like, the guy like killed me and raped my wife, but something about that guy, it's the problem is my slut of a wife. Like, this movie is, I don't think it's misogynistic. I think it's commenting on the misogyny of their society. Yeah.
So yeah, that's another way I connected to the movie was I could potentially be a lying ghost,
Well, yeah, I mean, you're not here. I can't see you. I can only hear your voice. So
yeah, who's to say I'm not one now? Yeah.
There's a little bit of I'm always a little bit not disappointed, but there's a change when you go back to the quote unquote real characters, the woodcutter and the other people, and I would compare it to, like, I love the comics, the graphic novels of Alan Moore, and I love his writing. But he always has these long text sections, which are always very good. But the second that you go from looking at comic panels to a wall of text, there's like this, my heart sinks a little. There's like this hitch in the giddy up.
It's like, I got to read the biography of what's his name. Yeah. And it does feel a little bit like homework.
Yeah, but that disappears like the second I get 2 paragraphs into the text thing, and it's like, I'm reading an Alan Moore novel. Like, I love this. And I get that in Rashomon. Like, I really like the sections of the real people and the way that they are reacting. And the priest is just like, he can't even believe like how horrible, what a miscarriage of justice like this is. And it's all acted very well. The woodcutter is really great. It's played by a guy named Takashi Shimura.
Yeah, he's fun.
Who worked a lot with Kurosawa as well. It was also in Seven Samurai, which is one of the best movies ever made. And but every time we go back to them, I'm like, okay, come on, where's the ghosts? Where's the where's the growth? Yeah, but they're really good. And of course, at the end, is the sort of moral center of the movie, is like when they find the baby.
Yeah, it's like that always kind of, or not always, but it just sort of surprised me a little bit because it wasn't what I was thinking about the whole time. I was thinking about just like the, people's, like excuses to lie and stuff like that, and I was thinking of it as like, that's, like a human failing or whatever, but I was thinking less of it as like, are there any good people, but I guess, that does come across too,
And it sort of has its cake and eats it too, because I think the movie would be on the side of morality and doing good things. But, the ne'er-do-well guy is like, you guys are talking all this shit about morality. And it's like, you stole that knife, didn't you? You stole the knife. And the guy's like, well, I had to. I got like 6 kids. Like, I've got to feed my little kids. And he's like, whatever. You're full of shit. And he just takes off. And he's never convinced. But at least the woodcutter and the priest are like, I guess we're going to raise a baby now. It's like what we have to do.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I guess it doesn't hit upon that a lot in the movie. Like that last note it leaves you on, where it's like, there's still hope or something. I don't know, but it doesn't. Yeah, it's making a moral point, but it's not like trying to preach to you. Yeah, that's true. I think it's trying to say that we're all selfish and we all have,
we do things selfishly, but it does. Every day you can help a baby out, or you could, do something. I think it's a really nice message.
I was like, I was happy to go to those scenes, by the way, because I did like the bad boy guy. I don't know.
He's making a fire. He's always scratching himself. That's something in like Japanese like media is like an uncouth person is always like scratching himself. I think you can imagine that Tajamaru probably has a whole colony of fleas that live on him.
Sure, yeah.
That are also evil. Well, I can't believe, we have to move on. I can't believe that we're only going to spend this much time on Rashomon, but did you have any final thoughts about the film?
No, yeah, like I said, that it was kind of a blind spot for me. Like that's another, I think we've done this a lot. We hit on these classic films, and I kind of am like always secretly ashamed, and I'd almost like lie about something worse to make you believe that I've seen Akira Kurosawa films, like I don't.
Well, someday maybe we'll get another one on the show here. I was thinking about the DS9 episode, The Magnificent Ferengi, which of course is a reference to Magnificent Seven, and The Magnificent Seven is an American remake of The Seven Samurai.
God, yeah,
and
let's do it. Let's do all three. And that remake with Chris Pratt.
And the remake with Chris Pratt. Yeah. Having to choose between, do we talk about Magnificent Seven or Seven Samurai is like, that I can't make that choice. That's cutting the baby in half. Like, I can't do that.
Yeah, I think there's precedent to do a triple feature.
Okay. Well, maybe
we'll
coming someday. Yeah, we'll see. Well, let's take a break from a word from our sponsors, and we'll be back with more backtracking.
I'm Mikan Hana.
And I'm Caliban.
And we're the hosts of the Sailor Noob podcast. I'm the expert.
And I'm the noob.
You're talking into the wrong end of the microphone.
Aye, aye.
Okay. Every week we watch a new episode of Sailor Moon and learn about monsters, fashion, food, culture, and of course, the Sailor Warrior of Love and Justice, Sailor Moon.
All right, now, what is her rank? Is she an admiral or a rear admiral?
Okay, shh. The ad's almost over. We're a couple of magical people, and every week we Moon Prism Power make up a new episode.
Steady as she goes.
Please stop that. Sailor Noob is available every Friday on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Shiver me timbers. All right, we're back, and it's time to talk about the Trek side of this equation. Trek is great. It's no Kurosawa film.
No.
And Jonathan Frakes is no Toshiro Mifune, but Trek, I think, as we've proved again and again on this show, is often prone to instances of savvy adoption of other cultural highlights. And perhaps one of its most overt instances of homage is a third season TNG episode where Riker is tangled up in an instance of he said, she said, the holodeck said. Trek's doing a Rashomon, it's a matter of perspective.
Next time on Star Trek, The Next Generation. A brilliant scientist is killed and Riker becomes a murder suspect.
I just know he did it. He killed my husband.
Was it a crime of passion?
She's lying. That never happened.
Or a violent act of jealousy?
You're a dead man, Apgar.
We both know Will's innocent.
The verdict could send Riker to his death. On Star Trek, The Next Generation.
Even before I really knew anything about Rashomon as a kid, I remember, I just remember this episode and liking it and thinking, oh yeah, that's a cool idea. You could do that. And every courtroom in the 24th century would have a holodeck, wouldn't it? Or maybe not. Yeah. Maybe that's too intrusive.
Well, they made it seem like it was such a new idea, and that we never see it again. So
yeah,
especially because we see other courtroom episodes later. But yeah, I hadn't seen this episode in like 10 years, and like I always remembered it. Like when we decided we were going to do this, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember when they like did that format, and I remember like the story and everything, and it doesn't even like. It didn't even like stick out to me as like an amazing episode or anything, but there's something just so memorable. Like it's one of the ones where it's like we did something different than your average episode. So
yeah, and even when what they're looking at is kind of not very thrilling, like it's just
really.
A situation where Riker went to a planet, the wife either did or didn't come on to him, and the guy blew up, and it's like kind of like a tame little story. I kind of wish that they had done it had been something more exciting and like epic that they kind of look at a couple different times. It's just the guy from Breaking Bad being like, I knew you were in here with my wife. It's just like he either got punched or he punched Riker. Who knows?
There's a moment in this, and it wasn't, I don't think it's their intention, but they hinted at something more interesting, but then they don't get to that at all. And it's when like they sort of start talking about whether or not Riker was attempting to rape the wife, basically.
Right.
And Deanna has that line of like, well, both of these things are true to you. And it's like, they almost got me thinking about like all the like discourse around like consent and stuff like that.
Right.
It's like, is this going to be an episode where like Riker sexually assaulted someone? And that's not what it's about. It's more of like, it's kind of actually fucked up a little bit.
Yeah, it is a little. Yeah. And I think the way they get around that, and I don't want to talk about the end of the episode just yet, is that they really go through, like they believe women. You know what I mean? Troy's like, okay, look, we heard her testimony. We're going to take it at face value. I know you. I don't think you would do this. But then they take the two different things, the two stories that we've seen, and they go through like line by line. They go, okay, take us to minute 27. Okay, at this point you said this, right? And so they use their the evidence that they've already got and then like assemble their thing. And it's like, well, okay, our readings show that this happened. And so we just take at face value that our heroes are right about this. But yeah, there is a lot of like things that are insinuated that are like, well, I guess that didn't happen.
Right. And they say it like it is such a, like maybe a revelation or like something you need to remember or something like that. But then it's, yeah. So I thought it was interesting. I thought it was like kind of thought provoking. Like, you could make an episode dealing with stuff like that. But it couldn't be then a character that is coming back every week that you're like rooting for. It's more of a, I mean, that's maybe something you could do in a show like Deep Space Nine or whatever, where you have kind of all the areas of gray characters that. Yeah,
they kind of bury Dr. Apgar because now not only is he a guy who died in a freak accident, but he's also a guy who was trying to like scam the Federation and was like lying about like his project and stuff like that.
Right. It does.
And then tried to murder Riker.
Right. It sort of shows the limitations sometimes that like Next Gen has.
And I love that at the end, I guess we are talking about the end. At the end, they're like, whew, never come back to this planet. Let's get out of here. Right. And there's like a dead scientist, a widow, and like this is all that planet had going for it. So like this project is like, is it shit canned? And it's like, let's get out. Let's go.
Right. Yeah. It reminds me of the
Step on it.
We'll Always Have Paris, the doctor in that one too, who's like, it's just like this time it'll be different. But it's like that. What are the ramifications of what you have done? You know,
right? Yeah, we'll be back to stop your time travel experiments, I guess, next season when you fuck it up again.
I mean, they pushed TNG also pushed boundaries in a lot of storytelling stuff, but then
sure,
you have your episodes like this that are, they're more classic. So I didn't think too much about it beyond that. I was like, oh, that part wasn't as important as I thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
To this,
I love the fact that this opens with a classic, just non sequitur opening. I just finished my Voyager rewatch. We just watched the finale of Voyager, and I like Voyager. I'm glad I watched it, but at some point, I think the autopilot kicks in, and they just start doing kind of whatever. And Voyager got really good at just opening in the middle of a story. Like everybody's,
sure.
We see Janeway. She's not in uniform. Everybody's on a weird planet, and then we learn over the course of the story, oh, they all lost their memories, and now they've been like, press ganged into working for this company or something. But when they try to do like the rando, oh, I'm just coming back from kayaking in the holodeck or whatever, they never do that very well on Voyager. And this is a classic one where Picard is, in a painting class. And we were talking about comedy. There's a great example of like some classic Picard Data comedy where Data's like rating his painting and he's like, okay, shut up. Stop talking about my painting.
It's so funny because it's like something that is it comes from Data's character that is also real. It's not like here's Data, I'm doing a joke. It's like he's doing something you would totally believe, and it actually makes a lot of sense.
You wanted criticism on your painting. Here you go.
Yeah, and the fact that Data like of course, like, he can recognize everyone else's as good because it follows, like, something he's been programmed to recognize, like, styles and patterns. But then Picard's is, like, this mix, so he can't appreciate, something that's kind of distinct.
It might have been good and kind of abstract, but Data's like, I don't think you applied this technique very well.
So it's a great joke because it hurts Picard a little bit, upsets him a little bit, but also, like, it kind of shows, like, Data's weaknesses too,
Yeah.
Good joke.
Little side ass in this scene too. I'm always surprised what you could get away with nudity wise on TV in the 90s, or this was 1990s.
Well, it's for art.
Yeah, I guess it's okay if it's art, but yeah, it's like, whoa, okay. I like the fact that as soon as because Riker comes back, and I think to sell the story, he's acting a little weird. And later on, we learn that he's coming from this tense confrontation with the Doctor. But he's like, let's just get out of here. Let's go. Let's not look at anything. Let's go. And as soon as the station goes, hey, what the fuck? Like, this guy's dead. And they want to meet with Picard. He's like, you can just stay here, number one. Like, he's believing his first officer. There is a Starfleet military code of justice that he wants to follow. Of course, the planet doesn't care about that. And so he's protecting Riker, but he's also, you can't be a part of this. Like, we're going to talk about you. So
that's such a good point you're making about, like, it being a good example of, like, opening up from, like, coming back from something. Cause it is like, it is a hot open, like, when the station or whatever explodes and all that stuff. I'm like fired up when that happens.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
And
you gotta deal with this.
They'll get Riker back on the ship, right? But that's not, like, what you're really worried about. It is, like, what you said about he's acting sketchy.
Yeah, and Picard's not really playing favorites. Like, he's protecting Riker, because if we hand Riker over to these guys, we don't know what's going to happen to him. Like, I presume that this planet is part of the Federation or is under their laws, but they've got all these kind of weird regulations. So if he tries to be magnanimous and understanding and hands Riker over, they could railroad him, they could do whatever, and we lose Riker. So he's just trying to take it as slowly and carefully as possible.
Yeah, which is like, that's such a Picard thing, is they always show him, like, I don't know, just making great decisions.
It's weird, like, we never see, if they ever do a show set in the sort of the Lost era, in between TOS and TNG, I'd like to see holodeck 1.0 or holodeck, prototype or whatever, because they introduced the holodeck in Farpoint, and everybody is, like, blown away that this thing can do this. And then in a matter of years, everybody's doing everything in the holodeck all day, all the time. And I like the fact that in this episode, they're like, wait, can we do this? Like, we'll interview these people, and then maybe we could plug it into the holodeck. And it's like they're coming up with this. Whereas
it doesn't seem that hard.
If they did this on Voyager, it'd just be like, yeah, let me just upload that to the holodeck, meet you there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of like the technology is advancing so fast.
There's a creep. Yeah.
Yeah, because they say in Farpoint, like, oh yeah, like, the trees are no problem. That's simple, compared to a human. But it's like, it never really appears that, like, making a human is that hard. I guess they had, like, the binars show up and, like, plug some info in there
and upgrade it. Yeah, give it more RAM. Yeah.
So they got an upgrade pretty quick.
Data picks up a rock and he's like, check this out, and, like, throws it, at the wall, and we see, like, oh yeah, okay, so they're still in a room. Right. Which, like, wouldn't that rock just vaporize and then an image of it would be seen? Wouldn't it continue? You wouldn't want to be playing spring ball or something and the ball just hits the wall. It's like, oh crap.
Yeah, there's a lot of continuity issues in the first episode. Wesley comes out, he's wet.
Yeah, right. Yeah, does it? Right. Yeah, if you eat a sandwich, does it disappear from your stomach? And,
whoa.
Yeah. So they do this, and I think it's obviously the episode has to happen to get our little Rashomon. But why would they ever agree to this? Like, it's a Starfleet holodeck programmed by a Starfleet officer on a Starfleet ship. They could manipulate and do whatever they want. Like, the people on the planet, the hair guy, is really putting a lot of trust in them in order to do this. There isn't really a scene that we see where I wanted a little scene where Picard like really does a Picard speech or whatever and convinces this guy that we're going to take this totally seriously, and on my commission and my code of conduct, like we're not going to lie about this, because they could have programmed it to look like whatever they wanted.
Well, I didn't quite understand what was happening. Like, was it? I thought it was just like showing their testimony, or was it calculating? Like, was it like simulating what happened? I don't understand, because why couldn't they have just like told them what happened?
Yeah, why would they have to like look at it specifically? Yeah,
like nothing was gained.
We have that. It's called a court. Yeah,
yeah.
Well, what was gained was, and I thought this was a really neat element, is that, if he's they recreated the guy's experiment because, and you think like, well, if it's such a weird esoteric experiment, how could they just remake it? Wouldn't it just be a dummy? But apparently they took all of his files and his research, which he was going to give them anyway, and then used that to replicate the device that he made. And so the device, the fake device, was still doing its job, and the beam on the planet didn't know it wasn't supposed to be, it was a fake device. So it's, the holes are burning in the ship and stuff like that. And they're like, what is causing this? And it's like, oh yeah, it's that thing that we made. That was just a mock-up.
Yeah. It just gets me because like they wouldn't have known that would happen. So like that's the only reason for it to really exist narratively. It's fine though. It's fine.
But it shows like how smart our crew is, because they could just go, that's weird. Remember that time that the holes got burned in the thing when Riker got convicted for rape and murder? Like they built all the stuff, and then while the trial's going on, they're like, oh wait, that thing is now that we know that, we can run back through all the information that we have, like they do at the end, and go, oh no, like at the exact right, and this is a thing that you have to swallow too, but at the exact right moment, the guy pulled a gun on Riker or whatever, and then it hit the thing when the thing was going off, and then the whole thing blew up.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a like narrative stretch or something, but it's kind of satisfying when it all comes together.
Looking at this from the perspective of like a court case, they do talk about opportunity, means, and motive, right? But there's never any believable motive. Like Riker doesn't need some scientist lady to throw herself at him. Do you know what I mean? Like he's like, we never really, I wonder if they had made her really like young and hot or something, or maybe if he had known her in the past. Like you never really buy, and maybe you don't need to because this is just a family show for kids or whatever, but like I never really bought that Riker would stoop to doing this. It's like, yeah, I'm just gonna bang this scientist's wife, that's fine.
Right. If they had a relationship like in We'll Always Have Paris, where it's like, ooh, a steamy ex-lover.
Yeah, and if he's compromised by his attachments or something. But the one where we see, the one that they program where we see him just going like, no, I don't want to fuck you. And then the guy throws a punch at him and he's like, don't even try. Look, I can see you guys are upset. I'm just going to go. Like, it's a little too clean, but I would believe that that's just what Riker, how he would behave probably.
I think it gets by just on how fun it is. Like I was describing the episode to someone later and it's like, yeah, it's just fun to be like, yeah, then she was like extremely horny for Riker. It's like not even funny. Yeah. She's like touching her chest while she looks at him every moment. And then you're like, and then Riker, no, he was like really horny for her. Like it's just, it's a good time. It's not like Rashomon for sure, but
the recreated scenes are really soapy.
Yeah. So I think I actually I tweeted out in those moments, like I love Riker episodes because not all of them. Usually they're like about him taking command or something, but this was a fun one because I did love just the super soapy kind of goofiness of it.
There were some like cool ways in which they had things that everybody agreed on, or like the way that they would play with things, like when she takes him to her sanctuary or whatever, and in his version, she closes the door on him, and in her version, he closes the door on her to like keep her in there. And then like Dr. Apgar always rushes in and goes, I'm not the fool you take me for. But he's saying it kind of in like, with a different context or like a different emphasis based on who's telling the story.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, like how they intersect. There is, I guess, some limitation too. Like there's things Riker says that like, you've now seen him for however many seasons. You're like, Riker would never do this specific thing.
You're a dead man. He would never yell, you're a
a
dead man at somebody.
That goes back to what you were saying about the relationship maybe is a little less believable.
Yeah, I like how they bring it doesn't map onto Rashomon perfectly, but I like how they bring the assistant in, and they're like, oh yeah, we did a little thing for her. And they're like, this is like holographic hearsay. Like this, nobody knows that this happened. Nobody was there. It was just you.
That's what I'm saying. Like if they could have like come up with like a scientific reason, like something that would have been gained in the actual law process of like showing this, and but I don't know. Like it's like, oh, we actually found some like footage that we can show in, hologram or something. I don't know.
Yeah. But instead, like I think the thing that they figure out, like the holographic or the Krieger wave converter, becomes kind of like the medium's testimony in this. The fact that technology and like just sensors give us this.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
This account. It has nothing to do with like eyewitnesses or people being there. Like they get this just from the data. That's like the spirit from the other world going, no, this is what happened.
That is a lot cooler than just like that hearsay testimony, because that was what I was referring to earlier. Like it's way less cool than the medium,
Yeah, it's just like, yeah, I think he wants to kill you, and also your wife said that you're a way better kisser, and yeah, I've always liked you too. It's like, what is this? Get this out of here. This isn't testimony.
Though again, with I got to go back with the Riker saying you're a dead man. Like I still got a lot of mileage out of that in terms of entertainment. So
yeah,
I'm not too upset about this kind of stuff.
I'm gonna blow up your station.
Yes.
Quote Riker, stardate this date. I think a cop show in Trek could be pretty cool.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, especially
we get a
because
thing
they
like
have
this.
the procedural element, in a lot of shows.
There's a moment in Picard that would just destroy my cop show, but like where Picard and his who are the Romulans that live with him or whatever, they're ex-Tal Shiar,
yeah,
and they go to like to Daj's apartment, and they're doing like the CSI thing. They're like, okay, I'm going to scan this thing, and it's like, oh, they only went over here and they were focused on this, so that must mean this and that. And like, I think that you could have a cool cop show with the technology, and then you could also, it would have to explore, like the nature of like policing and the kind of things that we're dealing with right now in real life.
Right. They did a little bit of that with like Odo. Odo had some of that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it was more the character. You didn't get the tech, except for normal Star Trek stuff. But there was never like with that Picard thing where you're like kind of like impressed by like the tech they have.
Yeah, he did some sleuthing. We talked about that episode, Necessary Evil.
Yes.
On Enterprising Individuals. Yeah, he's doing trying to figure things out. I also think they really need a lawyer on board, like really bad. They always do, other week. Yeah. They're getting into something where Picard's got to argue against the devil, or Data's like on trial for his life.
Yeah, and like Riker's got to defend him for some reason.
They really need a lawyer. Yeah, there should be a whole JAG office on the ship. Yeah,
weird stuff.
Getting into legal trouble all the time.
I guess they showed in Measure of a Man they were like setting up the JAG office. I think they mentioned.
That's true. Yeah, but there should definitely be somebody on board who is an expert on alien legal systems and like. And dealing with that. I kind of think that like in a lot of ways, and the show doesn't respect her enough to do this, but that should be Troy's job in a lot of ways, because she's counseling the ship and she's not going on away missions and stuff. So the rest of the time she could be studying local cultures. And I think she does that once in a while, but they don't really do it too much. In fact, in the episode Justice, it's Tasha Yar's job to like read the legal code and find that thing that says that will kill you if you step on the flowers. And she totally botches that because once again, Wesley goes on trial for stepping on flowers, and they really could have used that lawyer person. I like the fact that they have Troy at the trial. But I don't know why they think she needs to be there other than to just gauge Will's response to,
I guess they always
where
just
he raped somebody.
Yeah. They always just need her. It's like an extra, it's like a cheat a little bit.
Yeah. Because she's not lying. I can sense she's not lying.
I think
that's what she thinks happened.
Yeah. Which, if that wasn't there, again, for me personally.
Riker might have raped somebody.
Yeah.
there's
they should
the
put him on
episode
trial for that.
Yeah, mind crimes. There's that episode Violations too, where the weird brain guy, like, you know, is violating her, but like he goes after people and he takes like things that ostensibly did happen and makes them like bad memories. So there's a memory where Riker's getting a little handsy with Troy and she's like, no, stop, you know, and then it turns into like a full blown like assault. And so it's like, did one time Riker was like, hey, what's going on? And she wasn't into it.
Oh boy. Yeah.
Riker, problematic character.
It's season 2 of Picard. We'll get Riker's baggage out of here.
Go after that bastard. I know that I don't want this for the Trek future, but doesn't like CCTV cameras just fix all this? Do you know what I mean? Like if you've got sensors that can read a person's DNA on 3 decks over.
Yeah.
Like, don't you just have a computer running and you do the thing like they do at a convenience store? There's only one tape, right? So if nobody got robbed that day, you stick the tape back in. It records over the old tape, no problem. And just have the sensors running the whole time. And if nothing happens, then just delete all the sensor data.
This is where like a show,
slippery slope,
a prequel like Enterprise could have covered something like this. Because I remember talking about this back on Existence is Futile, because we talked about how you always have a thing on you. It always tells you where you are. Like there had to have been a concern at some point about like privacy issues, and so they must have come up with a way to like interface with technology on that level and also like maintain your privacy. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
because like that's not, we could have that kind of tech now, and we do, and it's like, it's destructive, you know? Like,
yeah, and we're really, you know, we're bringing real life data up to Capitol Hill to yell at them about, you know, all the ways that our data is being used. I actually talked, if listeners are interested, I talked to a guy named Dr. David Banks, who's a doctor of the internet, basically. He talks about and he teaches about big data and like the implications of data collection and stuff like that. And his whole thing, I mean, we had a good talk, but his whole thing was basically, I don't know, like there's just corporations want our data and we seem to want to give it to them. And we could totally end up in a universe where they know everything about us and we are trusting them. And you know that you can't trust money. You can't trust, you know, a capitalist entity. And this is another one of those magic wand waves, I think, that Trek has, where they just go, but it's not a problem.
Yeah.
You know, people are, for some reason, something's in the water in the 24th century. Everybody's good and they have all that information, but it's just to save your life. It's just to beam you out of the volcano just in time or detect that you're the evil clone you or whatever. And they never use it for bad stuff. And that's one of the things that I really want CBS Trek to do once it calms down is tell stories like that. Tell stories where we see that being a problem and tell stories about how they decided to finally fix that, you know, in the Federation. That's something that I think the Section 31 show can do.
I guess it does stuff like that with everything else in TNG, where it's like, how do we get there? I guess they do flesh it out a little bit in Deep Space Nine. Like I think of like when there may have been changelings on Earth, you know, and there is sort of that like, oh yeah, it's not actually like totally fixed, you know, it made it feel a bit more realistic, you know.
They start violating people's privacy, and you can't have too many, I guess, extras and side actors on a show, but they use Brock Peters' character as like the focal point of resistance to it. And of course he's like an older guy. And so it doesn't give us a full picture, but I wonder if there is a level of acceptance in the Federation, but also, you know, in Brock Peters' like generation, it's like, you don't do this. Like, I know that you're worried about changelings, but you don't just come into somebody's house and go, give me your blood. You know, it's just, this is not a thing that we do here in the Federation. And now you guys want to do this and it's not cool.
Yeah, in general, I guess Deep Space Nine gives me a optimistic but kind of like believable view of the future, where it's like you can build a better world, but you kind of got to be vigilant because things can always slip bad, you know?
Yeah, and rogue element of Starfleet can try to take over Earth.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Bad news. Anything else to cover about this episode that we missed?
No, I mean, we talked about that joke in the beginning. I didn't even think we would talk about that. So
yeah, we did. I think we got it all.
I liked all the fight scenes, like the retellings of the bedroom fight scene where they laid each other out. But I always loved the physicality of those TNG fights.
Yeah, it's a little stagey, but very clear what's happening.
Yeah, very fun.
We were talking about how Rashomon was, I think in its own way, a subtle commentary on the misogyny of, ancient Japanese society and possibly modern Japanese society. The Trek episode kind of avoids that completely, to its detriment, I think.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
this lady is a fucking liar. It's like we never ever explore, because, like we just pointed out, she really, Troy's powers never work when we need them to, but like she, I guess, really believes that that's what happened. And I guess somebody could be delusional and believe something, or maybe just beat the machine in terms of like beating Troy's lie detecting. But we just kind of leave her hanging, leave her out to dry.
Yeah, I feel like if the episode had like honed in on that a little bit more, like it could have made that, like that, it could have transcended to me more than just like a fun soap opera episode and been like a little bit more interesting.
Yeah. And maybe there's not enough room, but as the aggrieved, we see her testimony, but we don't get into the emotions of it. And, we barely talked about the woman's story when we talked about Rashomon.
We didn't really do that justice, actually, because that was like a very big part of the movie for me, too. Yeah.
Really getting into her story and the fact that like the thing that she gets from her husband is like this look of loathing, because it's her, she was raped. Like, I guess that's her fault. And that's all that she can really, that's all that she really gets out of the husband, in her story. And to the point where she hates him more than she hates, the bandit is really interesting. It's really, I don't know, it's just really chilling.
Yeah, and like
just her being a victim of the misogyny too, and like the way that she thinks about what happened.
Yeah, and like the way she views it as her specific form of humiliation, and how she'll hide it is very different, than the other guys, I feel like.
But in Star Trek, it's just, oh man, he really wanted to make out with me.
Yeah. Kind of, like the limitations again, yeah.
Star Trek failing women, come on.
I've watched some of the early TNGs there, and it's like, wow, what's going on, guys?
That's my next podcast. My next feel bad podcast is just like Star Trek and women, and just the way that it constantly just fails them as far as characterization, storytelling, you name it.
Yeah,
it'll be different
for
next
what
time.
A lot of people want to get out of Star Trek. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, on that awesome note, let's move on to our technological exchange. And we get a lot of tech in the Trek episode this time. It's really the solution more than the complication. But that's what a lot of Trek is about. So on every show, we randomly pick from a list of Star Trek technologies, and we add what we get to the non-Trek media. We subtract it from the Trek episode to see how each would be different. It's our technological exchange, and we roll on a list of 10 items that includes phasers, holodecks, tricorders, transporters, warp drives, replicators, communicators, shields, advanced medical technology, and androids. And I'm going to activate the technology in my random number selecting device. And I got 10, which is androids. If androids existed in the Heian period of Japan, how would that story be different?
That would make for another great testimony, I guess, for sure.
The android. Yeah, the samurai has an android that accompanies them.
Instead of a medium, they
never got the horse's testimony. I just realized.
Maybe the horse could be an android.
just scrape it on the ground. But yeah, you get an android's testimony, and it would solve it would ruin the movie, because everybody's testimony is clouded by their shame and their investment in what's going on. But an android would just tell you exactly what happened.
Yeah, he feels no shame. Yeah.
We just broke Rashomon.
Well,
I'm
also,
sorry.
It might have never gotten to where it was, because if a fight broke out, he'd just hold them up in the air, like he did, like Data held Wesley up when he fell in the water.
Right.
Just
Toshio Mifune's just kicking his little legs out there.
Yeah, he would just whip his ass. So.
Well, let's assume that the android is not programmed to fight.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
He's a
and cannot hold a sword because it's a samurai's robot, but not a samurai.
It has no arms, maybe, too. You could.
It can just pick things up with its mouth.
Or make it the horse. Make it the horse. Yeah.
All right, the horse is an android.
Yeah, and it can talk.
And it saw everything. Yeah.
Again, we just created another great movie where you don't. This one you don't even change much. You just make the horse an android.
And the android broke down. That's why he fell off the horse and was captured at the end of the beginning of the movie. I guess.
Yeah. Okay, that works.
Okay.
The android wouldn't feel shame about. Well, he just can't. He's not programmed that way.
What if the baby was an android?
Or it could be like Blade Runner, and it's like, who is the android?
Oh, they're trying to figure out who the android is.
Yeah.
So they're all telling stories at the fire, and like we're going to listen to your story, and if it doesn't seem kosher, then you're the android.
And it could be like a double framing device where it's like they're telling a story about people who they don't know who the android is, and then when they're talking, it's like they don't know who an android is.
Right. And then we zoom out, and then it's 50 years later, and an android with a gray beard is like, that was I thought I was going to lose my life that day, but it's a crazy story. Shut up, Grandpa.
Yeah,
I think we got it.
Great. Yeah,
I think we got it. So if we took androids out of the Trek episode, how would that be different?
Well, Captain
Picard would quit his job and become a painter full time.
Yeah, that would inspire him.
With his avant-garde style.
And what else does Data, he helps with the experiment?
Yes. Yeah, he's involved. He and Geordi are just the little tech twins in this, and they're kind of doing the
fun little
tech.
Mystery. Did he feel important? Or, like Geordi could have probably figured this out.
Yeah, Geordi, they use them kind of interchangeably sometimes, they're both... they find the technological solution or whatever it is. And then you've got the episodes where Geordi and Data, we're exploring their relationship or their connection. Whenever there's something wrong with Data, it's always Geordi that is the one who fixes him or whatever.
This does neither, though. Like, I feel like their story is not good. Or it's not bad either. It's just like they're there to, like Geordi could be an android in this episode and you wouldn't know. Because he's just kind of like, he doesn't really have much going on.
Well, he can't be because we took androids away, but yeah.
Shoot. But yeah, he could totally did we ever establish if the computer is artificial intelligence, right? I think we took it out once.
Yeah.
Because Geordi might need the computer's help, but...
I think that we did, because the computer does so... Nobody ever talks about the computer really on the show. Like, there are these gigantic computers on the Enterprise that take up multiple decks, and so much is necessary, or they do so much of what happens on the show and on the ship. And we never talk about the fact that, they're voiced by Majel Barrett or whatever, but we never talk about the fact that they are incredibly capable and can respond intuitively, but they're not self-aware. Do you know what I mean? Like,
right.
It's like Data comes out and people are like, I can't believe this. You guys, there is a artificial computer being that actually is like self-aware. This is crazy. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like it's like the second to the last episode of TNG, like the ship becomes self-aware, doesn't it? It makes that weird little rainbow thing. And so nobody ever really goes into that because I think it would kind of break the show a little if we did.
Yeah.
Because we're not doing a story about Detroit Become Human or whatever, where we're examining like our relationship to self-aware technology. I don't know why I picked that one. That's such a dumb game.
I guess they like hint at it in Measure of a Man, where they're like, if the ship's computer could it refuse or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess that establishes that there's some difference that we just don't know.
Yeah, but I think in terms of intelligence or androids for this argument. But the computer doesn't really it's really Data and Wesley that figure out that the radiation part of it,
right,
and that this thing is working. I think the computer is just sort of providing the backdrop.
Yeah, so I think Wesley could do it, and I think Geordi could do it. Like, they don't present this as like a Data needs to be there, which they do a lot.
Yeah.
Like, Data saves the day a lot.
In fact, that the scene that would come right before, the drawing room scene in a murder mystery is just Wesley, Data, and Geordi all just working together, like, on the thing. Like, Wesley is the one who's like, and now, now we have the answer. We know who killed Dr. Apgar, but they all kind of do it together. So it would just take longer, and maybe they wouldn't get it, or maybe they wouldn't get it in time. The Crag or whatever might be like, all right, this is a farce at some point, and just say, look, we're just going to summarily take him. So yeah, maybe Mike Riker wouldn't have made it out of that one. He wouldn't have got away with it again.
They'd executed Riker, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know if that's ever on the table, but they definitely would have sent him to the the gulag.
Then it becomes a 2-part episode where they got to break Riker out of jail.
Right. And then they like use the holodeck to like they do a leverage to the wife. So she wakes up in her bed and she thinks she's in her house, but she's in a holodeck, and then they have to wait for her to confess to somebody that she got Riker framed.
That could have happened in this episode, I think, if they wanted to stick on the track of like she's just a fucking liar. Just be like, we're gonna get her ass, we're gonna make her tell the truth.
Yeah, that would be a good third act.
She wakes up, her husband's alive, and he's like, like, I can't believe that I actually did that. And she's like, that's crazy.
I beamed down to the planet. I faked my death so we could get Riker and then check her response, this is totally unethical, but like, yeah. We should call this
Cisco
part of the show
like,
that. Yeah, Cisco would do that. Yeah, screw her. We should call this part of the show the writer's room, because we always end up like creating a whole new episode.
Yeah.
I think
it's gratuitous.
Yeah, a little bit. I think that we covered it. Should we tell people what's coming up on the next episode of Backtracking?
Yes. So, the next episode, we're going to be talking about the Voyager episode, Tinker, Tenor, Dr. Spy. I don't really remember this one, so it should be interesting. But I guess how it relates to, or the similarities it has to, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, which is both a short story and a film. I don't know, if you read like the first 8 lines of the description of this movie on Wikipedia, it makes me never want to see this movie, but
Gooey is doing this under duress, everybody.
No, it should be interesting. So I'm looking forward to that. It's change of pace. Short,
I don't know if they still do it, and honestly they shouldn't, right? Like, when I think about the things that I learned in school, this was a New Yorker story in 1931. It's like, all right, but why is this really important? Not that art and media isn't important, but I hope they've updated the curriculum a little bit. But when I was in school, everybody had to read the short story, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, for some reason.
Really?
And it is, it's
I never heard of it.
Okay.
Until the trailers for the movie.
Well, I think it's a generational gap, but yeah. And it's very short. It's only like a couple pages. So I'm really wondering how Ben Stiller is going to muddle his way through a 2-hour movie. But I'm looking forward to finding out.
Yeah, you could do it. I mean,
he's just so in love with Kristen. What's her name?
Wig. Kristen Wiig?
Or Wig.
Wig.
Yeah.
Right.
I thought you said Wick. That's Kristen Wick. That's what I want to to see. She's telling jokes. She's throwing knives at people.
Don't set her off. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Don't kill her dog. So that's what we'll be doing next time that we return for the show. And that is it for this show. Thanks for listening. If you like the show, tell a friend. You can follow us at Backtrekking on Twitter. And we're always looking for new connections between Star Trek episodes and popular or even ancient media. So bring it on. We want your suggestions. Gooey, tell the people where they can find you online.
You can find me on Twitter as well. I'm at GooeyFame.
And I'm on Twitter at Caliban, K-A-1-I-B-A-N. And I'll point you in the direction of, if you're an anime fan, my podcast, Sailor Noob, where we talk about every episode of Sailor Moon. My co-host is an expert, and a Japanese foreign language speaker. And I am not. I don't know anything about Sailor Moon. I just know it's for girls. And we go through every episode, and we're getting near the end of the first series of Sailor Moon. So if you're interested in anime and also hearing us talk about Japanese culture, check out Sailor Noob at noob_sailor on Twitter. And that is it for us for this week. We'll be back soon. And until then, keep on trekking.